Serhii Plokhy, Chernobyl, The History of a Nuclear Catastrophe. In the book, Chernobyl, The History of a Nuclear Catastrophe, Serhii Plokhy takes us on a riveting journey through the events leading up to and following the disastrous explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in 1986. By delving into the intricate workings of nuclear reactors, Plokhy illustrates how a series of human errors and design flaws led to the catastrophe that shook the world. The author also uncovers the alarming details of how Soviet authorities were slow to respond and attempted to downplay the disaster's severity. Readers can anticipate a comprehensive account of the explosion's consequences on human lives, the environment, and its role in the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union.
The Chernobyl Catastrophe Unveiled. In 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, located in Soviet Ukraine, was the third most powerful on Earth. The city of Pripyat, built 2 kilometers away, thrived until an explosion in the plant changed everything. To understand the magnitude of this disaster, one must grasp the workings of a nuclear reactor, including fission, the chain reactions, and the importance of control and cooling systems. Unbelievably, the Chernobyl catastrophe occurred during a safety test of the reactor's backup power system. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant, ranked as Earth's third most powerful in 1986, had a major impact on the surrounding area. To house the plant's workers, Pripyat, a city built just 2 kilometers away, rapidly developed into a bustling community. Life there was considered luxurious by Soviet standards, thanks to amenities like an ice rink, swimming pools, and stores stocked with meat and dairy. However, this seemingly idyllic scene was shattered on April 26 when a devastating explosion occurred at Chernobyl's Unit 4, where its 4th nuclear reactor was housed. To fully grasp the extent of the disaster, it's important to understand the inner workings of nuclear reactors. At their core, these reactors are designed to generate heat, which turns water into steam, ultimately powering turbines to produce electricity. They accomplish this through a process called fission, in which atomic nuclei split into smaller fragments. When fission occurs, both energy and subatomic particles called neutrons are released. Neutrons are essential for inducing fission, but they require other compatible atoms to collide with. Some atoms, like uranium-235, are unusually unstable and thus more likely to undergo fission. Their tendency to split can trigger chain reactions, with neutrons colliding with other atoms and creating additional reactions. By packing uranium-235 atoms close together in fuel rods, these chain reactions are initiated. However, the process is far from perfect. Neutrons travel at such high speeds that they may not hit other uranium atoms. To increase reactivity, nuclear plants utilize substances like water and graphite to slow these neutrons down. Control rods, made from materials such as boron and capable of absorbing neutrons, are inserted into the reactor's core to regulate the power of the reaction. Additionally, cooling fluid is circulated through the reactor to manage its overall temperature. The calamity of April 26 at Chernobyl's Unit 4 arose during an unbelievable set of circumstances. Operators were conducting a safety test on the reactor's backup power system. If a power loss were to occur, electricity would be needed to pump cooling fluid into the reactor to prevent overheating. While diesel generators were available for this purpose, they required 45 seconds to activate, a dangerously long delay. However, the dying rotations of the steam turbines could potentially generate enough electricity to cover this gap. The fateful test intended to confirm this assumption, but instead, it led to a catastrophic explosion and the fallout that followed. Fatal errors in turbine test. On April 24, the evening shift at Unit 4, led by Yuri Tregub, was tasked with conducting a turbine test. Unfamiliar with the procedure, Tregub sought assistance from his superior, who sent the deputy chief engineer, Anatoly Dyatlov. After finally getting the go-ahead from Kiev, Dyatlov arrived late and dismissed Tregub's questions regarding the shutdown procedure. The inexperienced night shift crew, with the pressure from Dyatlov's reprimands, struggled to manage the control rods during the test. As the reactor's power fluctuated and fell far below the required levels, Dyatlov insisted on continuing the test, leading to the eventual explosion of Unit 4. The evening of April 24 started with uncertainty as Yuri Tregub, leader of Unit 4's shift, was unsure of the procedure for the turbine test. His superior directed the deputy chief engineer, Anatoly Dyatlov, to assist. With permission granted from Kiev at 10 p.m., Dyatlov arrived at Unit 4 an hour later, downplayed Tregub's concerns, and issued orders to commence the test. By midnight, they had managed to reduce Unit 4's output to the necessary 760 MWT. An inexperienced night shift crew took over, led by Alexander Akhimov and Leonid Topchinov, facing Dyatlov's reproach for their slow progress. During their work with the control rods, a fault caused the reactor's power to plunge. By 12:28 a.m., it was outputting a mere 30 MWT. As they scrambled to remove control rods and raise the temperature, Dyatlov stubbornly ordered the power to be increased back to 200 MWT, far below the target. Maintaining even 200 MWT proved challenging, and Topchinov continued to remove control rods, leaving only 9 of 167 by 1:22 a.m. The reactor's water-based cooling system began to boil into steam, reactivating the fuel rods and causing a massive power surge. When Topchinov pressed the AZ-5 button for an emergency shutdown, it instead triggered a chain of explosions that devastated Unit 4. Chernobyl's fatal design flaw. The Chernobyl disaster resulted not only from human error but also from a significant design flaw in the RBMK nuclear reactors used in the Soviet Union. These reactors used graphite as a moderator, which was far less safe than water, and had graphite tips on their control rods. When the AZ-5 emergency safety measure was triggered, the graphite tips increased the reactivity of the already unstable reactor, leading to devastating explosions. The RBMK reactors were favored due to their power output, cost efficiency, and potential for plutonium production. At the heart of the Chernobyl disaster lies a fatal design flaw within the high-power channel reactors, RBMK, unique to the Soviet nuclear industry. Unlike other nuclear plants that use water as a coolant and a moderator, RBMK reactors utilize graphite, a far more hazardous material. Astonishingly, the RBMK reactors also featured graphite tips on their control rods, which were intended to decrease reactivity. This puzzling design was premised on the belief that the graphite tips would grant operators better control over nuclear reactions. Unfortunately, it was this ill-conceived design that set the stage for disaster. On April 26, 1986, when the AZ-5 emergency safety measure was initiated, the control rod's tips were positioned outside the reactor's core. As the rods were inserted, the graphite tips heightened reactivity, catastrophically destabilizing the reactor. Consequently, the reactor's coolant water instantly turned into steam, causing an explosion that propelled a 200-ton concrete shield through the roof. As cooling ceased, a second explosion ensued, wrecking the containment building and dispersing radioactive debris. So why did the Soviet Union advance such a precarious reactor design? The answer lies in the RBMK reactor's high energy output, low cost, and capability to efficiently produce plutonium, a critical component for nuclear weaponry. In pursuit of these advantages, the Soviet authorities effectively planted a time bomb, which finally erupted on that fateful day. Adding insult to injury, the Soviet response to the disaster was far from expeditious. Denial amplifies Chernobyl disaster. In the initial moments after the Chernobyl explosion, the specialized military fire department rushed in to find fire pockets and the obliterated Unit 4 reactor hull. Ill-equipped firefighters were exposed to extreme radiation and suffered severe health consequences. Dressed in standard protective gear, the responders saw chunks of graphite rocks on fire, tossed from the reactor core. Unaware of the deadly radiation emitted from the rocks, the firefighters began experiencing symptoms of radiation sickness. The authorities' denial and ignorance only exacerbated the situation. The plant workers, particularly Dyatlov and Akhimov, refused to acknowledge that the reactor was damaged, attributing the symptoms to shock. Viktor Brukhanov, the power plant director, also downplayed the severity of the explosion, grossly underreporting the radiation levels in a memo to party leaders. This denial resulted in the needless risking and ruining of countless lives. The chilling battle with radiation. Radiation sickness manifests itself through ionizing radiation, which causes cells to perish or malfunction. The Chernobyl disaster left the town of Pripyat vulnerable as authorities hesitated to act. Boris Sherbina ultimately led the evacuation efforts and coordinated multiple measures to avert additional catastrophes. The true cost of these actions still remains shrouded in mystery. At its core, radiation sickness stems from ionizing radiation. This invisible force plucks electrons away from their atoms, leading to the death or malfunction of living cells. When exposed to high doses, individuals develop acute radiation syndrome, ARS, grappling with agonizing symptoms ranging from diarrhea to internal organ failure. Unable to deny the scale of the disaster, the affected plant workers and firefighters started arriving at Pripyat Hospital, showing all signs of ARS. Yet, weighed down by bureaucracy, local authorities hesitated in evacuating the town until they received instructions from higher-ups. As a result, even when radioactive ash rained down, Pripyat's residents remained oblivious to the lurking danger. Relief arrived when a state commission, steered by the no-nonsense politician Boris Sherbina, mobilized their resources. Acting on the advice of chief scientist Valery Legasov, Sherbina ordered the evacuation of Pripyat 36 hours post-disaster. Although the move was deemed temporary, the residents would never return. With evacuation underway, taming the raging reactor became the Commission's primary concern. Helicopters were deployed to drop a mix of sand, lead, clay, and boron, totaling 5,000 tons. Many pilots braved the nuclear blaze but tragically lost their lives in the process. Despite their efforts, the true extent of the reactor's destruction remained unknown. Concerned about the possibility of a powerful explosion, Legasov dispatched engineers who maneuvered through flooded corridors, directing water into containment chambers before firefighters pumped it out. Subsequently, miners dug a chamber beneath the reactor and constructed a protective concrete platform to prevent further dispersion. The impactful choices and sacrifices made in the face of this devastating incident remain largely unappreciated. No one can comprehend the number of lives lost or how vital these measures truly were. However, these endeavors steered the world clear of an even more unimaginable catastrophe. The Chernobyl Cleanup. Following the Chernobyl disaster, a massive cleanup operation was put into action, mobilizing more than 600,000 liquidators to manage the contamination. These individuals, ranging from soldiers to scientists, worked tirelessly to decontaminate thousands of square kilometers, despite limited information and protection. Among their activities, they bonded radioactive dust to surfaces through spreading a liquid substance, conducted controlled demolitions, and even buried animals. One of the most impressive tasks completed was the removal of radioactive graphite from a reactor roof, with 3,000 soldiers manually shoveling the hazardous debris. Unfortunately, 28 people from the accident died and were buried in specialized coffins. Lastly, a monumental effort was made to construct a giant concrete sarcophagus enclosing the compromised reactor, providing a crucial layer of protection. Chernobyl's far-reaching fallout. The catastrophic consequences of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster are hard to fathom. Assessing the environmental impact, human cost, and political fallout provides insight into the scope of the tragedy. The official Soviet death toll understates the ramifications, with some estimations near 93,000 long-term fatalities due to radiation-induced illnesses. Child cancer rates in Ukraine surged 90% after the event, and over 19,000 families have received assistance for family bereavements. Chernobyl's environmental destruction contaminated 100,000 square kilometers of Eastern Europe and resulted in countless animal deformities. The disaster also brought political consequences, including the imprisonment of 6 plant managers and safety officials, and the suicide of the Government Commission's chief scientific advisor, Valery Legasov, whose research on the incident angered Soviet officials. Chernobyl's role in USSR collapse. While the devastating impacts of the Chernobyl disaster on human health and the environment are widely known, less recognized is its significant part in accelerating the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. The catastrophe eroded public trust in the government, inciting criticism and giving rise to eco-activist movements that boosted momentum for national independence and denuclearization. The chain of events culminating in the dissolution of the USSR demonstrates that Chernobyl's lasting consequences extend far beyond its radioactive fallout. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986 shook not only the environment and people's health but also influenced the political landscape, eventually contributing to the fall of the Soviet Union. This catastrophic event exposed the deep cracks within the USSR, with former leader Mikhail Gorbachev even admitting that the meltdown was the real cause of the Union's downfall. The event shattered the already fragile public trust in the Soviet government, particularly in the republics of Ukraine, Belarus, and Lithuania. Thanks to Gorbachev's relaxation of censorship laws that same year, activists and authors criticized the government's handling of the disaster, revealing its far-reaching effects. Reports of widespread contamination, health risks, and cover-ups led to mounting outrage and distrust in the government's capacity to protect its citizens. At this crucial moment, the introduction of semi-free elections in 1988 only fueled further dissent and unrest. Protests against communist authorities emerged, and by 1990, constituents in several Soviet republics elected deputies promoting national independence and denuclearization. As these movements gathered strength, Lithuania declared independence in March, and the political situation spiraled out of control. Finally, in December 1991, a landslide yes vote for independence in a Ukrainian public referendum signaled the eventual dissolution of the Soviet Union. Although the USSR disappeared decades ago, the far-reaching consequences of Chernobyl's disaster continue to haunt generations. The disaster played an instrumental role in reshaping the 20th century political order, as it drastically hastened the Soviet Union's collapse.
Serhii Plokhy's Chernobyl, The History of a Nuclear Catastrophe, meticulously examines the causes, impacts, and far-reaching consequences of the Chernobyl disaster. Through examining the complex interplay of human errors, design flaws, and Soviet authorities' reactions, the author unravels the devastating effects the accident had on human lives, the environment, and geopolitics. As an impactful chronicle of one of the most tragic events of the 20th century, Plokhy's work provides valuable insights into the importance of safety, transparency, and responsible governance in the age of nuclear power. The legacy of Chernobyl serves as a stark reminder of the tremendous responsibility that comes with harnessing this potent energy source.